Monkeyboy's YouTube channel is both intersubjectively and stance independently the best, and I'm talking from the heart.
Fools are not worth keeping up. Like, word up. I'm killing myself out here, son. Yeah, which year you want to talk about?
Hey, what's going on?
Yeah, which year you want to talk about?
Well, reason for God existence. But
yeah, if an argument God exists?
Yeah, my English isn't really that good, so tell me to clarify if there's things that I say that don't make sense.
Okay.
But yeah, I think there's multiple things you could point to that probably make it necessary that God exists. And
necessary in what modality? Or like what sense of necessity?
This thing could only be possible if God exists, type of necessary. I don't know if that's like...
Yeah, that underdetermines every... Are you familiar with what modality is or no?
No, I'm barely getting into logic.
Okay, well this has... doesn't have to do with logic, but... Or I mean, at least there... In any case, there's like logical necessity, nomological necessity. Have you ever heard of that? Or like physical necessity,
I just got
or
the 4X,
epistemic necessity?
Like paper thing, I'm barely starting reading that.
So when you say God is necessary, like, are you saying that... Like, what are you even saying?
I'm saying this phenomena that I'm going to point to is not going to be possible without God existing.
What do you mean by possible?
Like, it wouldn't happen. It's not physically possible for this thing to be the case without God.
Yeah, but when you say it wouldn't happen, that I can interpret that as a claim of it's unlikely. Right, but you're not saying that, right?
Yeah. I'm not just saying it's unlikely. I'm saying it's not possible for it to be the case.
Yeah. So what do you mean it's not possible?
Okay, like it's not possible for there to be a tree without a seed. Or, I don't know, like...
I don't know what you mean by possible. I don't need examples of things that are possible. I need to know the semantics behind possible.
I don't know, like this thing wouldn't be the case, is like what I'm trying to say. This action wouldn't be expected.
Yeah, but again, that could be read as probability. You're not saying probability, so what are you saying?
I don't know, like I really don't know the word for it.
Are you saying there's a contradiction if that happens without God?
I don't think it's a logical possibility. I think it's logically possible.
Then I have no clue what you're saying. How about this? Because you don't know what you're saying, I don't know what you're saying. Let's just say you're saying it's probable that the phenomena is highly unlikely under atheism and highly likely on theism. That's the only way we're going to have this conversation.
Okay.
What is the phenomena supposed to be?
Well, like any sort of change after prayers, or like the resurrection, stuff like that.
Let's say Jesus resurrected. Okay, so how do we get from the resurrection to God exists?
Well, the only accounting like information we have is the Bible, and anything else you could point to that's going to be like secular. They would tell you that it's not going to be possible for somebody to die and then resurrect after 3 days. So, like, if the only accounting we have is the Bible...
I'm asking you... Look, you're saying the best explanation for Jesus resurrecting is God. I'm asking you, what's the argument? Well, I think it's better than the candidate explanations or the other explanations that are available.
What other explanations are there for the resurrection?
Well, there's, like, obviously, like, infinite. But I can just throw, like, random ones that you can make in, like, 5 seconds. Aliens revive Jesus. Jesus has superpowers. Jesus is a wizard. Like, come on. It's not that hard to think of stuff.
The source that tells us about the resurrection...
If you read like a single Marvel comic, you can think of like dozens on the spot. Like,
no, you're right. But the source that informs us about the resurrection also tells us about how it happened, right? So it's expected.
No, so I believe the type of causal story it provides.
Well, I mean, that's what everybody does, though, if there is some sort of explanation. I mean,
okay, everyone does, but that doesn't tell me whether or not they're justified. I see that explanation. I see a bunch of others. And I'm asking why I think those are better. Like, look, if I just take aliens, for example, the aliens have the desire, they have the technology so they can bring it to fruition. You know, they want to deceive humanity. They want to remain hidden. Why would that explanation not just be better? Or why would you think your explanation is better?
That is possible, but I think mine is more probable because mine has more basis on its explanatory reasons. Like, it accounts for the God, it explains what the God is. And then, not only does it just talk about the God, but the God also interacts with the scripture that is sent to the human.
Yeah, that's presuming God exists. I'm talking about the fact Jesus resurrected. Why is that fact better explained by God?
You know, I think I'll check to see if this guy has a shish kebab. But if you don't want to wait...
I'm going to meet you. You're hot talking about shish kebabs. I thought, for a second, he was trying to respond to you. I was like, what? Yeah. So, yeah, what I'm not seeing is why I think the theistic explanation is better than the aliens one.
Okay, dude. I mean, the reason... Okay, I don't think this is a fair question because, like, if I give you a car and I give you the manuals for it, and then somebody else comes to you and he's like, oh, it's aliens that control the car. Like, you have no reason to believe him, and you have all the reasons to believe me because I gave you the justifications. I came with the car, I came with the claim, and I showed the justifications for that claim. Like, sure, it's possible something else could be that reason, but it's only reasonable for me to assume what is given to me
Yeah, I have one explanation. You have one, and we're comparing the two explanations.
You have no
to see
basis.
which is more reasonable.
There's no basis for your explanation.
Actually, I do. I actually think my explanation is preferred because it's more parsimonious. I think that it has the same explanatory power. It explains the same things as well. And it doesn't have a need for supernatural entities or theistic entities. It doesn't introduce those unnecessary entities to explain the phenomena. So I think it's just preferred, right?
Yeah, but
yours is violating the principle of parsimony. Mine's isn't.
Well, not necessarily, because like,
yeah, you're the supernaturalistic or theistic entities are not necessary. So I have a more moderate claim, right? I'm not saying anything over or above what we need to explain the data. You are.
I think that would be true if if there was no way to demonstrate the supernatural is real. But I think like prayer would be like one way to demonstrate that supernatural activities are real, right? I think if you pray for something and that thing is very unlikely, and after your prayer,
you're saying, okay, now you're arguing there's independent reasons to think there's already supernatural things. One is that doesn't matter because obviously that's still not going to be. I don't know what's the point of even saying that, because obviously the number of things that we have if we're just comparing the probability of a thing being explained naturalistically to a thing being supernaturalistically explained, obviously the naturalistic ones blow the supernaturalistic ones out of the water. But this stuff about prayer would just be the same thing where I can better explain them with aliens, right? So that wouldn't do anything, because that would be the same inferential strategy. So that would be shifting from one explanation to explaining the same thing with both our same explanations. You're still going to appeal to God. I'll still appeal to aliens. So that's not doing anything interesting.
Yeah, but wait, the distinction between mine and yours is, sure, you could say it's more likely because you're not adding more supernatural bullshit into it. But I could you can't demonstrate any of your claims, whereas like mine could be tested. Mine could be.
What claims can I not demonstrate?
Well, when you make any sort of assertion about these aliens, you have no way to actually justify they exist in the first place. You're just saying.
You and I have the same number of justification. You're just confused. The inferential strategy we're using to justify the existence of the entities like God or aliens is the fact that if these things existed, you would expect the available phenomena. We find the available phenomena. Therefore, that's a degree of confirmation for our theories. Both our theories expect the same phenomena, and I'm saying mine wins on parsimony.
Okay. What would be a way you think would be somebody, like, how would I demonstrate that God is real without appealing to, like, reasons and saying, okay, this is better expected if God was, like, instead of those arguments, what is one way you think is going to be possible for somebody to demonstrate the supernatural is, like, actually true or real?
Supernatural or the existence of God?
Or the God, existence of God.
Well, you can give deductive arguments, so non-Bayesian arguments. You can give like ontological arguments, a priori arguments. I don't think any of them are good, but
okay then. I've read this one a couple of days ago. I think it's called the Kalam argument, and I think like that could be, well,
that's not even an argument for God, but people use that argument and then give stage 2 arguments that are supposed to get you to God, but the Kalam alone is not an argument for God, and the Kalam alone fails. I mean, I have no reason to accept either of those premises. And the stage 2 arguments are even worse, actually. So even if I accepted the Kalam, even then I wouldn't have reason to think God exists.
Well, but everything in nature that we observe has a beginning. So like in terms of like what is prior to the start of the universe, like if I was to make any supernatural claim, it's equally as likely to be justified as yours. Like you providing any well, I don't know. Wait.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, then I don't know. Like I don't think I have any way to demonstrate that God, in and of himself, like actually exists.
I don't think it's true that everything we observe that begins to exist has a cause. I don't have any reason to think that. But even if that were true, that the premise would still not be justified, because the first premise is, well, technically there's 2 readings of the first premise, but on the more the non-robust, the more moderate claim, it's just inductively invalid, because the set of observations we have are not representative such that we can generalize. On the more robust claim, I have no reason at all to accept that, because that's talking about metaphysical modality and it being necessary, it being true in principle. But on either account, yeah, I wouldn't have any reason to accept the premise that everything that begins to exist has a cause, and it's not true everything we observe that begins to exist has a cause. Not only are there legitimately scientists today who think there are straightforward examples of things that are causeless, that's not even what I'm talking about. Because when you observe stuff, you don't observe things having the property of having a cause. You make inferences about things having causes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that. Like
you can't observe a thing and observe it has a cause or it's caused by something. From your observations, you can make an inference that something else caused it. You might be entirely mistaken.
Right. Well, but
like you can imagine, you see a ball thrown at a window and you think that the window then shattered because the window shattered, that the ball shattered it. You might be mistaken, because imagine there was like some dog whistle that you couldn't hear and it was at such a high vibration, it shattered the window. At such a time, it almost looked like it, right?
All right.
And you don't observe causes, but you make inferences from your observations to what likely is the cause of something you observed.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things we observe that
I agree with that.
most people observe things and they don't even attempt making inferences about what has causes.
I think for those cases, like, I think it's called is where you keep repeating the thing to see if the conclusion keeps happening. Then you could probably assume it's the case. But going back to what you said, which is going to be like, if you were to give any sort of like naturalistic explanation, then you're just going to be more justified because I'm still adding in the supernatural and it's not necessary. Like by that logic, there's really nothing I could present you because for whatever phenomenon I point to, it could always be like, there is this naturalistic reason to why it could have
That's
possibly.
right. Actually, that's called the dispensability argument for theism. It's an argument I run that theism can never win explanatorily. Like, there's no reason to offer theism as an explanation for anything because the naturalistic candidate or competitor is always going to win. Right? Because you can have structurally the same naturalistic explanation and always win on parsimony. And I think that's right, and that's why I'm not a theist.
I mean, yeah, but it just seems really bad faith. Like when I point to people that changed after, I mean, I know this is anecdotal. So like people, I mean, anecdotal doesn't necessarily mean it's bad either. But
I've probably had whatever same experiences. Yeah, I was a Christian for most of my life, for 16 years. Like, obviously, I've had experiences. It's just obviously the explanations that are non-theistic are just better. So there's not a reason to think that those are theistically explained.
But
In fact,
you don't really believe that though, because there's no way you think there's some sort of naturalistic explanation for Christ resurrecting that you just find more.
I don't think Christ even resurrected, and I would think that a naturalistic explanation would be way more plausible.
Dude, okay then.
But I think it's so improbable that Jesus resurrected that I don't think it at all.
Okay, how about this? Again, like what if I point to this doesn't again prove, well actually it does if I keep pointing. Okay, if there's something that is very unlikely to happen but it keeps consistently happening after I pray, would that to you at least raise at least the probability of God existing? Because the only change that is happening is my prayer, right? And every time I pray it keeps happening.
It does, but that offers confirmation not only for that explanation but a bunch of others, right?
Not if I'm praying to God. I keep saying I'm only going to pray to God.
No, but look, if there's aliens who wanted to deceive humanity or you, that Christianity is true or God exists, and they have the cognitive capabilities such that they are aware of maybe they're so rational, they know what is expected if God exists, which is that maybe he'll answer this prayer. They have technology, they can read your mind, they can bring those events to fruition. So then they do that. That's an alternative explanation that captures the same datum, and it would just win on parsimony. So obviously, you praying and your prayers coming to fruition is expected if there were aliens deceiving you of Christianity.
Okay then, but following that logic, that could be true to anything. I could say that my experiences are just not even real because maybe I'm like, what's the argument? Like a brain in a vat or something? Like that could be.
Yeah, but we're not talking about Cartesian skepticism.
I don't know what that
We're not talking about skepticism about the external world. We're just talking about whether one explanation is better explained this way than that way.
Okay, but why apply this rule when it comes to prayer, but not like I think. Well, no, I know. Never mind. I do know. I don't know. Then it's not possible according to the standards that is presented. I don't think it's possible for anybody to present any sort of argument that would like under your view there should be no sound arguments. Oh wait,
What?
I mean,
Well, that's
yeah.
why it says so.
I think you misunderstood the whole alien thing, monkeyboy. I think that confused him.
Huh?
You're saying I didn't explain it well, or?
No, I think he just misunderstood. That's why I gave the brain in the vat example. Like the point is, there's going to be naturalistic explanations that, which the data of prayer are going to determine those naturalistic explanations and the God explanation. And you gave the example of the brain in the vat, but the point is the brain in the vat hypothesis and your everyday experiences. The everyday experiences though underdetermine the skeptical hypothesis over that you're actually having those experiences. But there's no reason for you to believe that you're a brain in the vat.
All right. Yeah. So like I'm viewing this, so there's no reason I agree.
But yeah, obviously the whole point with skepticism is that the skeptical scenario are equally the datum that you have are equally expected in those hypotheses than that you're actually having experiences. That's the whole point with skeptical scenarios. Monkeyboy's point was just that there's no datum that you can offer in which you can't accommodate the datum based on some naturalistic explanation like the alien.
No, I understand this. Yeah, I get the point he's making now. But like, okay, then Monkeyboy, if you were to grab me for a second, this God exists and the world is just the way it is. Like, how would somebody like me be able to convince atheists like you guys that God exists? Like, there's nothing I could do, right? Even if this God was to exist.
No, I don't think you could.
Right. So
Not
like,
at least if I was being rational. That's
that's
precisely
the
why I'm
problem
not,
of your
not a
standards, then,
theist.
right? Because you're not even like giving it a chance for change. Like the metrics you have here make sure, like even if God was to be real, they give you like reasons not to believe, and it's just kind of like impossible to prove. Then
But I mean,
I don't know how this is anything but
it seems to me that even if we had less rigorous criteria, you'd still be facing an enormous challenge, right? Like, are you familiar with this idea? You're probably not familiar with this idea in philosophy of science of what's called a progressive research program. But in philosophy of science, there's an argument that what makes for a good, let's call it a theory, I guess, is that it has a track record of predictive success, and when it encounters disconfirmatory data, right, when it comes up against things that seem to be inconsistent with the theory, it doesn't just adopt what's called an auxiliary hypothesis to preserve the theory from falsification. So, like, the idea would be something like, you have this theory, it predicts a lot of stuff, right? And when it encounters something that seems inconsistent with the theory, some datum or set of data that's inconsistent with the theory, it doesn't just say, oh, well, there must just be some problem with the detector, right? Even if you have no independent evidence that there's a problem with the detector, right? You could say, oh, well, I just assume the detector isn't working properly, right? And then your theory isn't disconfirmed, right? That's like considered like a bad move, right? And so what you would want is something, you'd want, when you adopt something to protect your theory from falsification, you'd want it to have some kind of independent justification.
Wait, can I ask you a question, Jack?
Yeah.
Would you agree, though, like, if we're trying to find, like, the metrics that he's using for me to follow to prove God exists, only will capture the natural world. And I'm talking about the supernatural, so it's not going to be possible.
No, but my point is,
That's
my point is that if something like Christianity were a progressive research program, then maybe you could, if Christianity or whatever your religious view is, if it like consistently generated successful predictions and didn't adopt what are called ad hoc auxiliary hypotheses to protect it from falsification. Maybe if we had less stringent criteria, we could accept that. But I'm just saying, even if I were willing to accept that, it seems very unlikely that Christianity or any other religious belief system could offer that, right? That it's ever really met even a challenge like that.
Well, I don't know if I agree.
Let alone the stronger challenge that monkeyboy is presenting.
What
You
is
see what I'm
this
saying?
strong criteria that monkeyboy is putting?
Well, he's just saying that he doesn't think there's anything that which I'm not saying I disagree with, right?
I'm asking, like, what is the criteria that you going forward?
Oh, no, he's
Just-
just
yes,
saying
a strong criteria.
he thinks that no theist hypothesis could ever win because in a theory comparison, because you could always come up with a counterpart naturalistic theory that would be more parsimonious. I think he's saying something like that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, look, even if there was in principle a way that theism could win, it seems like very unlikely that theism has ever offered anything like that. Right?
Yeah, that's what I want to say.
What do you mean?
Because-
Like, everything within the world is compatible with the
thing
Christian
is-
framework, right?
Well, no,
thing
I
is,
don't think so.
Well, the thing is, like, parsimony isn't the end all be all. The point that I'm making here is, let's just say tomorrow we discover something like in the atom or something. The first passage of Gospel of John is written there.
Yeah.
I think that's like really good evidence for God and Christianity. It is true that you could look up some kind of like naturalistic hypothesis that aliens or something.
Yeah.
And so they installed it. And that hypothesis and that explanation would be more parsimonious than the atheistic explanation. But I just take that to be an ad hoc and an explanation that's problematic on other grounds. And actually, if such a good wants to come about, I would say that's actually like good evidence for theism and for Christianity. But I don't think theists have anything close to that evidence.
Wait, but I
And
think I do, though.
I think the strength of this is kind of lost if we just say, well, the naturalistic hypotheses are always going to win by parsimony. I think that kind of like doesn't make just clear how weak the case for theism and for Christianity is.
So, like, V, let me ask you this then. So Fausto, again, points to some sort of phenomena that is better expected or only expected under the theist framework, but you guys just find a way to naturally explain that. You would grant me, like, you would still think, despite yours being parsimonious, you you'd still think mine is better. Like if I have more accounting to, I don't know, like whatever metric you use to grade it, if I was just to fulfill all those metrics, would you then grant me the position maybe like this God does exist? Or
Well, it's gonna depend. I mean, like it might just be really good evidence for theism, but like once we look at the total evidence, naturalism still wins off.
I don't know if that's true. Like prayer. If I point to prayer, and I asked him this earlier too. Like if something is very improbable,
No, you're
like
not.
unlikely.
You're not understanding what I'm saying. I'm saying it might be the case that some datum favors theism, and a naturalistic explanation is going to lose because, well, it might be more parsimonious. It might be ad hoc or something like that, and so the theistic one is going to win. But such inferences are not going to suffice for actually accepting the belief. They're just going
Then
to
what
be
is going to
evidence.
suffice? What is sufficient then?
No, I think you're missing my point here. What I'm saying is, you might have a successful argument for theism, but that doesn't suffice to believe in theism. Because, let's say, for example, I don't know, fine tuning or something is good evidence for theism, whereas like evil is evidence against theism. And so when you weigh the total evidence, naturalism wins. But at least when you're looking at fine tuning, it might be the case that the theistic explanation is the best explanation. But I'm saying that's not the case. I'm actually saying theism doesn't win in any battle whatsoever. But I'm saying I don't have this kind of like a priori principle that the theistic explanations couldn't ever win. I'm just saying there is no case like the one in which passages from the Gospel of John are written on the atom. On the atom.
Right.
But I think
you're
in such a case, if we were to discover passages of the Gospel of John on the atom, I think theism would be an explanation for that. And I think cooking up like an alien explanation would just be ad hoc, and the theistic explanation might actually be a better explanation.
But you still don't believe, despite being a better explanation. That's going to be sufficient enough for you to believe, right?
No, it might be sufficient enough for me to believe. I'm just saying it might be the case that something is actually evidence for theism, but it's not sufficient to believe in theism. There might be other countervailing evidence against theism that we have to like factor in.
Okay, but I believe when it comes to prayer, it's very black and white, right? Again, if I pray for this one deity, I make it clear who I'm praying to, and the results always come, then I don't see any sort of argument you can make against that. Like I think then would be like, would you assume then it would be reasonable for you, like I'm saying for you, to believe in God?
No, I think that'd be a bad reason to believe in God. I don't
What?
think the prayer datum is anything akin. I don't think the prayer datum is anything akin the example of the atom. We have like the Gospel of John.
It's
Like,
better. Well, no, never mind.
What's the datum here? The datum here is you get on your knees, you ask for something, and something akin to what you've asked happens
Right.
a couple of times. How's that?
How's that evidence?
Yeah.
Well, that's why I made it very clear in my point, though. I said something that is very improbable, very unlikely, happens after prayer consistently. So if you pray every day for this unlikely thing, you consistently keep getting the result. It's not expected, right? But if we understand your prayer as the reason why this thing is happening, which we can, right? If you keep praying, you keep getting the results, then the only causal relationship, the only causal reason is going to be the prayer. Then I think it's very, this is more than sufficient. And I think this is very good enough. I think this is a very, I don't know, I'm stuttering. I think this is a good reason for you to believe.
No, but what's the, is the datum, is the datum something like you pray, every day you pray to win the lottery. You just happen to win the lottery.
Right.
And one day you didn't pray for the lottery just to test and you didn't win anything. But the next day you prayed for the lottery and you won the lottery again.
Yeah, that would be good.
Is that like a datum?
I think that would be a good data to believe.
Yeah, but imagine such a datum, right? Now you have to ask yourself, what's the explanations here on the table? And let's say somebody offers theism. Well, what's the other explanations offered?
There's none, because remember, by the naturalistic means, it's going to be improbable.
No, but improbable doesn't mean there are datums that are improbable all the time that we offer hypotheses for. I'm just asking what is the datum and what are the explanations on the table that we're looking through? For example, if it was the case that the datum was this lottery example that I just gave, you prayed 5 days in a row and you won the lottery each time. You didn't pray on the 6th and you didn't win the lottery on the 6th, but you prayed on the 7th and you won on the 7th. If the hypotheses on the table are theism is one, and the second hypothesis on the table is actually the lottery company is in cahoots with someone who's carrying out an experiment on you. And so they're just making sure that you get the winning lottery each day that you pray.
Oh, come on.
If those are the two explanations on the table, well, the latter explanation is going to be better.
No, not better, but well, sure.
No, it is going to be better in this case, because in this case, we didn't ad hocly cook up the explanation, right? Those are just the initial explanations that we were given. And then we have to see, do they accommodate for all other datas? If they accommodate for all the other datas, obviously the latter is going to be better, unless there's some evidence that is incompatible with the latter. For example, there's also evidence, for example, actually the the lotteries weren't just bought from like a single company, so were bought from like a lot of companies, and so that's incompatible with a single company being in cahoots. Like, what other data are we looking at? So that's what I'm saying. Like, when you're doing these kind of like abductive style arguments, you have to think, well, what are the other explanations on the table that we're considering?
Yeah, I mean, unless you're able to offer different, like, a better explanation to why the prayers work, then I don't know. Like, I don't think there's a defeater for it.
I think on this, well, I don't think there's any datum to speak. Like, what is this datum? Like, people pray all the time, the prayers are not answered. People pray to different things and claim that like different deities answer their prayer. Like, there's like studies where people pray to the bathroom and others pray to God. Which, those who pray to the betterment. But like, what's the datum you have in question that you're thinking of specifically?
Well,
like, if you had a datum like the one with the lottery, that'd be very impressive. But like, we don't have any such datums for prayer to begin with. So which instance of prayer were you even thinking about?
well, this is a problem because, like, for the theist framework is you're not really under the theist framework. It's expected that testing these prayers is not going to get you any sort of results because you're not supposed to test God. But I don't know, like, would you consider anecdotal evidence, I guess, as maybe sufficient enough to raise the probability of God existing?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you might have experiences that are, evidence for you yourself personally, and you'd be rational to update your credence based on those experiences. But I'm not going to be rational if I update my credences. But I was just curious, what is supposed to be like the datum of prayer that like theism was like one explanation for? Because
like people getting healed, like when they have cancer, and like there's stories about this, right? Where people
but if you actually look at any systematic studies on like prayer, like they kind of like speak for themselves. I don't know if you looked into like all the studies on prayer.
I have. I think one study even showed that people that prayed had horrible results compared to like people that didn't pray. But again, remember, this is all like compatible with my view. Matter of fact, it corresponds with it because the Bible is very clear on don't test God, and the study's testing God. So like the results are going to be skewed.
They are consistent with theism. But I was just curious, like, was it actually like a datum of prayer here in question? I don't think there are any interesting datum of prayer.
Yeah, well, I don't know, guys. I don't know if I could present any sort of like non-anecdotal evidence that would suggest God. I don't know. Like, I don't think I have any explanation now. But I mean, it's got to be one.
This is like important because I don't want you going away thinking that there is no evidence that they give, because that's the impression you seem to get initially from monkeyboy. Because I think that if you had evidence like the lottery example of prayer, the Gospel of John being written in Adam, that'd be great evidence for theism. That could actually be great evidence for theism, and that could actually convince me or monkeyboy or Jack of theism. So I don't think there's this like a priori ruling out. I mean, I guess Jack, you can speak for yourself, but I mean,
I think that there's logical issues, but like I'm not sure I think God is logically possible. But
there might be, but I don't want it to, because like, theism don't have anything in the vicinity of such things. That's what I'm trying to like.
No, wait, I understand. I just don't have anything that fits that.
But I think maybe there's more to say about this, not even apart from like the kind of like disagreement that you're trying to offer to monkeyboy, even apart from those issues, because I think that there is probably a lot to say about all of that.
Okay, guys,
but you have to go. Okay, well, come back because I want to talk to you about the problem of evil. Because I was just going to say that I think if he's talking about Christianity, he was saying, well, I think it's consistent with everything that we see, right? And there's probably a way to make it consistent with everything we see, but that would be kind of uninteresting, an uninteresting version of Christianity. But then in the interesting versions, it seems like it's not consistent.